Thank you guys for joining us for our part 2 of accessible course design. As we get started today, we're going to kind of recap what this series of sessions has been about, starting with, what is digital accessibility and kind of why it matters to us. So I'm Jenna Cinnamon. I am an instructional designer here at the Stanton campus, and joining me today is Dr. Thompson. Dr. Thompson's also an instructional designer here at Stanton, and we have a few other CCIT employees on with us as well. We also have Christina. She's one of our ed techs. You'll see her at a few different campuses. So to give a little bit of the recap about why behind accessibility, starting back in January, we talked about what is digital accessibility, why does it matter, and how it benefits all students, not just those that identify with a disability. So the standards that we use here as an institution is WCAG. So WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. These are recognized worldwide, actually, for the standards of how people can interact with content posted on the web. There are different levels of WCAG standards, and it's really important that we're aiming for compliance as a higher ed public institution. Awesome. So something we ask ourselves if it's accessible is we focus on the core principles, which is perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust. These are the 4 principles that were the foundation of WCAG, and they kind of give us the roadmap for how we design our content that works for everyone. So if you weren't able to join us in our previous sessions, there are recordings on our CCIT Lunch and Learn website, and we invite you to check them out. So the next thing we talked about in our series was the faculty 5. These are 5 things that we feel faculty should be empowered to do right now in their own courses and in their classrooms. So the 5 are meaningful hyperlinks, which means giving them descriptions instead of saying click here. We'll talk about documents today, actually, and we visited HTML pages last week. We're going to discuss video captions in pretty good detail today. Last time we looked at images and alt text and even looked at how AI can help us do that. And then finally, evaluating third-party resources. The first one is the meaningful hyperlinks. So that first example says, click here to see the next section. That is not accessible because it's not saying where that link is leading. We also did an activity where we listened to a screen reader, and if we don't give descriptive text, it will literally read out the entire URL, like https://. So we really want to make sure we're having meaningful hyperlinks in our courses. This was the activity that we completed before, and we also learned that the screen readers do not read color, bolding, highlighting, or any of those other type of identifying features. So if you want to emphasize something, please do it in words, not just by using color, bold, or highlighting. As for documents, in a little bit, I'm actually going to do a deep dive into Microsoft Word today to show some accessibility features in action. But both Google Docs and Google Slides have a built-in accessibility checker. It's called Grackle. It's actually an add-on, I should say, not built in, but it is a free extension that you can add to your Google platform. Microsoft has a very robust accessibility assistant, which also gives you tips and tricks of how to fix things once it does its scan. Last time we were together, we looked at D12's Brightspace and the accessibility checker built into the HTML editor. We do want to point out now that the icon for accessibility has changed. It used to be an I symbol, but now it is the universal symbol for accessibility. So it's a person inside of a circle. So you might have seen that update already if you've checked out your courses recently, but that symbol has recently updated. Part of the Faculty 5 is the captioning. Today, we're going to also take a look at captioning in action and how we can ensure that we have accurate captioning for our students. And last week, we talked about images and alt text, about using alt text to describe what an image is. And we actually looked at Claude.ai, which was a great tool where we can upload an image and it can give us alt text. it still needed human intervention. And we are not here to say that everything is going to be streamlined in this accessibility journey. However, there are tools to really help us. And finally, the last Faculty 5 item is third-party resources. So when you want to use something in your course, such as Quizlet, Flippity, ThingLink, Edpuzzle, whatever it might be, do your due diligence to see if it has an accessibility statement. The accessibility statement usually includes the VPAT, which is a company's way of disclosing if they meet accessibility standards set by WCAG. So it's really important that when you're working with publishers or finding these third-party tools, that you take a minute and take a look at the accessibility statement. If you aren't really sure, by all means, submit a ticket to CCIT, and we'd be more than happy to partner with you. Sometimes if I find a resource I want to use, I actually have to send them an email and request it. So we really want to try to find resources that are accessibility from the get-go, not something that they're saying, well, we're working on it, it's on our roadmap, but that doesn't mean it's accessible at this moment. In today's session, we're going to kind of do a two-part on this. We're going to talk about what makes a document accessible, and then I'm going to show you in Microsoft Word what this actually looks like in action. And then we're going to dive into media. We're going to look at what makes media and videos accessible, and then I'm also going to demonstrate some of that real time for you as well. So as I'm going, feel free to unmute, drop questions in the chat, because this is a really interesting topic, and there's a lot of new things that even us here at CCIT are learning every single day. So as we talk about creating accessible documents, the practices that we're sharing, I am mostly talking about Microsoft Word, but the principles still apply in Google Docs. I know across the college, we all have different preferences in which platforms we may choose to use. So all of the principles that we're talking about are fluid across both of them. So our key accessibility principles. The three things I'd like you to keep in mind are to use accessible formats. I have been guilty of this many times. I will make a beautiful Google Doc or Word doc, and then I download it as a PDF. If we do that, it can lose a lot of the accessibility features. We should actually leave it as a docx file, so things like the alt text still are preserved for our images and things like that. And we really should design smart. Create reusable templates. I'm currently working closely with the business department, and they like to use interactive, like guided notes. So what we did is we set up one master template that was accessible with headings and structure, all of that. And then we just keep making a copy of it as we go through the modules. And finally, leverage accessibility features. Use the built-in tools to meet Section 508 standards, which are the WCAG standards. So Microsoft Word and Grapple and Google, they do have a lot of this already built in. Once again, not here to say that it's perfect, because all of this still does require human intervention. So first thing that you should be empowered to do is to provide headings for structure. Headings aren't just for looks, they actually give structure in the code for screen readers. Using built-in heading styles allow assistive technology to navigate and interpret content correctly. This makes it easier for users to understand the information and to keep it organized so they can jump around how they'd like. So you can see the screenshot, and I will show this shortly, that in Microsoft Word, there is a section for styles. And when you're using your title or your heading 1, heading 2, you actually want to select that button and not just make the font larger and bold. Next, use the built-in features to organize content. So when I say this, I've done this myself too. I'm trying to line things up. So I was the queen of tab. I would tab until things got lined up correctly. But that is not accessible. Microsoft Word and Google Docs have like tools such as columns so that it can organize the information so assistive technology can read it correctly. So one little trick that we'll talk about is, thinking about how you want your content to be read. If I want it to be read from top to bottom and then top to bottom for the other list, I'm going to want to use columns. Now, if I want it to read From left to right, top to bottom, I might want to use a table. So pausing for a second to understand how I want the information to be conveyed will really help us organize the content for our students. Now, lists should be real lists. If we manually type dashes or numbers, it doesn't create a true list in the code that assistive technology can recognize. So you'll want to use built-in list features such as the bulleted items, the Roman numerals, whatever it might be. And that is in both Microsoft Word and Google. And this one comes up frequently, and it's about tables. Tables should enhance, not hinder, accessibility. In Word and Google, there are table tools to actually create tables correctly with headers being identified as well. There's going to be a couple things that we're going to demonstrate in just a couple minutes that can kind of show you how to do that, but there are some do's and don'ts for tables. The first one is to not split or merge cells. I've done that many a times in full disclosure because I liked how things were centered at the top, but that actually makes the table inaccessible. The next part is to only have one header row. So when I say that, in the next slide, I'll show you an example of this in real life, but instead of combining two tables and putting them into one big one, that is not going to be our best practice. We're going to want to separate them into two separate tables so that only one main header row is identified each. The pro tip at the bottom, and I love this, and I'm going to demonstrate it shortly, is Shift F1. When you are in Microsoft Word, doing Shift F1 will bring up the formatting panel, which will help you determine if your tables are formatted correctly. So with tables, what's accessible and what's not? Now, the easiest way to explain this is to think of things as either simple or complex. I have two examples here. The top is an example of a simple data table. It talks about Paris and Rome in two separate tables, and they only have one header row and one header column. Now, as for the second one, do you see how the two were kind of married together? Though it may look nice at first glance, it's actually not accessible because there's essentially different headers within there. There's the Paris and there's also the Rome. Also, it looks like those cells might also be merged to blend all together. So merging, splitting, and using multiple headers in a table are not going to be accessible for our students. So keep it simple is the way to go. So our big tips for creating things accessibly in Word. If you start with accessibility in the beginning, it is much easier than backtracking and trying to make it accessible. So do not use the draw tool in Word. You're actually going to do insert table, and I'll show you that in just a moment. You're also going to want to give your data table properties such as a title. If you give it a title and someone's using assistive technology, they can decide based off that title if they want the table to be read to them or if it's information they really don't need. You also want to designate your headers correctly. And once again, I can't say this enough, but you don't want to have those nested tables, so those stacked tables, split cells, or merged cells. I know, like I said, I have been guilty many, many times using merged cells because I liked the way the formatting looked. And then I learned how inaccessible it really was for our students. So a couple other things that I'm going to demonstrate in just a moment is the alt text as well inside of Microsoft Word. And Laura, thank you for dropping that in the chat about Claude. So in Microsoft Word, they do have a built-in tool that AI generates the alt text for images. Once again, accessibility will always require human intervention. So for this example right here, I put in an icon of a calendar, and it did generate text, a close-up of a calendar. I have to ask myself, does that information really matter? Is that picture really necessary? If the picture is not necessary, I'm going to mark it as decorative and the screen reader will skip right over it. So using alt text wisely and carefully will really help convey the correct message to our students. This next one, I had no idea about. Now, in Microsoft Word or in PowerPoint, we can insert text boxes. To make text boxes readable by assistive technology, they must be in line with text. I know I'm guilty by selecting the text box in front of text or behind text so I could move things around freely, but that's actually inaccessible and the text box will not be read by assistive technology. So we always want to have our text boxes be in line with text. All right. I covered a lot, and I think it'll really be beneficial to kind of show this in action for everyone as we kind of learn all of this together. In full disclosure, here at CCIT, we are truly committed to improving our accessibility as a college. And accessibility, there's never really an official finish. We're constantly learning, we're constantly improving, and that's all that we're asking of our faculty as well. So I'm going to change my screen to come over to my Microsoft Word. I believe everyone can see it. Can I get a thumbs up for my Microsoft Word? All right. So at first glance, if I look at this weekly schedule, to me, it looks like it has a title because I am not visually impaired. I am not using assistive technology, and I can tell that weekly schedule is bigger and bolded compared to the rest. But if I actually select the text up here at the style banner on the ribbon, I can see that it says normal. So that means when a screen reader is reading this, it does not read it as a title. So I'm actually going to change it to say title. It really didn't change much in its appearance to you and I, but it is tagged correctly now as a title for assistive technology. Now on here, I have two tables. Once again, Jenna's been guilty of this herself. I'm in a hurry and I'm just like, I'm just going to snip a little picture, put it in my announcement or put it on my document and go about my day. The reality is this one down here is an image. The way I know that is when I select it, the picture formatting toolbar comes up top on the ribbon. This image is not accessible, and adding alt text to this would not be the best alternative either. If it's a table, it should be formatted as an actual table like I have up here where you can see all of the individual cells. So images of tables is not accessible, so I'm going to delete that one out. If I look here, it looks like I have a numbered list, but the reality is when I highlight the number, it doesn't highlight the numbering feature at the top of my ribbon. These are not real numbered lists. In order to use a numbered list, a lot of times it will do it for us. If I do 1 period space testing, oh, it didn't do it for me. So my I don't want to say auto generate, but that feature is not turned on right now in my Microsoft Word. So to add a true formatted list, I'm going to select the numbering tool and testing this out. You can see the differences when I select the number, they all become highlighted. And at the top, the numbering feature is also shaded in to show that I'm actually using a numbered list. I also always encourage people to think about, is it a bulleted list or a numbered list? Does the order of the information matter? If the order of the information matters, you're probably going to want to use numbers. Or if I'm going to say there are 4 ways I can make tables accessible, I'm probably going to want to use numbers. Now, if you're just listing features or something of the sort, it's okay to use bullets and the screen reader or assistive technology will read it correctly. And before I play more with the table, I want to take a look at the text box. So this is how I normally loved my text boxes. I loved that I can move them wherever I wanted, put them over to the side to like add a graphic, use it for formatting, but this is not accessible. When I select this little layout options, the only one I would like to use to keep this accessible is in line with text. So what that means is it does have to stay to the left and it will read it in order. So once the screen reader is done reading table is in line with text, it will go to the text in the text box, and then it would continue reading down here. So even if I wanted to move it over and have it say over here and then format it like this, this is not accessible. So the key is to have it in line only. Any questions about those features before I talk a little more about tables specifically?
I just have a little question about this.
Yes.
So I understand how that makes it accessible, but a lot of times for visual layout, you want it someplace different. So how does that come into play? Does it?
I love that question, Kathy, and you're absolutely right. So one of the tools you could do for that is to make columns. So I believe it is under layout, columns, and say I want to have 2 columns. So this obviously it reformatted everything because I didn't highlight a certain section. So let me take some text and I'm going to highlight it and I'm going to do columns just in that section. So for that visual appearance that you're talking about, I could say put text over here. I can put text over here and then it can continue on the other side. We could also use columns to put an image on one side and not the other. So columns would probably be the easiest way to format that.
Okay, thanks.
That was a great question. No, I'm right there with you. When we think of that visually appealing or engaging, right? We want to design for all students. So I'm really glad that you asked that. Any other questions about that? That was really good. All right. Now, tables. So I'm going to go through my workflow of how to insert a table to try to make it accessible from the start. So on my toolbar at the top, I'm going to go to Insert and then Table, and I'm going to select Insert Table. I never want to use Draw Table. That feature will never be accessible. So I'm going to insert a table and say I want 5 columns and 2 rows, something easy. And I want the top to be the days of the week. Thursday, ooh, caps locks, and Friday. So there are a couple things I would like to do. I'm gonna highlight this header row. From the table design portion of the ribbon, I wanna make sure that header row is checked off. The second part was really new to me. You're going to select table layout and select repeat header rows. Nothing happened. It doesn't look like anything happened to you or I, but it tagged that as its header row. And here's the way that I can tell. On my keyboard, I'm doing Shift F1, which reveals the formatting panel, okay? So I'm going to open up my table. So do you see how I double clicked and it expanded it over here on the right? You can see, and let me turn on my annotation tool. You can see right here where it says row, repeat as header row. I know that it's tagged. I can also tell up here that this is shaded in like a darker gray to show that it's turned on. This is especially important if your table is going to go multiple pages. So that heading will carry on to multiple pages if it's, either going landscape or if it's going portrait as well. So the 2 things I checked for the repeat header row, which is under the table layout. And I also checked under table design that the header row was checked off. So once again, we want to keep things simple, but I know we want to keep things visually appealing. So you can still get fancy with it to some extent. Maybe I want to shade it. I like doing like a dark blue background. And if you notice, it automatically changed my font to white because I want it to be high color contrast. So the white is a really good color on top of the navy blue. So you can still have fun with these things, but we want to kind of keep that accessibility in mind first, and then add those little bits of flair that I know I like to add too. So I'm going to delete some of this for now. I'm going to close my reveal formatting, and I want to show you the built-in accessibility checker here in Microsoft. So I'm going to go to Review in the ribbon, and then check accessibility. The accessibility assistant pops up over here on the side. It tells me that my color contrast looks good. My tables, it has a header that's checked off. I don't use merged or split cells. So it's a nice checks and balances for me. Okay. Now let's take a look at maybe if I change something. What if I changed this to be yellow and I decided to change my font to be white? That is very hard to read. And the accessibility checker caught it on the right-hand side. It says hard to read color contrast. And it even gives me some recommendations of what I can change it to. So it takes just a second to go through, and you can see that it's changing all of them for me just by clicking the color icon. So start with your accessible structure, then add those little bits of color and fun and images that you want to include. Yeah. So if you take a look at this screenshot on here, I have circled high flex teaching strategies. And if you notice, everything is perfectly capitalized. April's actually in the audience with us. This is April's video. And April took the time when she uploaded this to YouTube to make sure it had accurate captioning. So we're going to talk about this a little bit. I'm going to go through a workflow that I would love to credit Christina with. She's been working on some things behind the scenes. So thank you guys for all the collaboration on this. So to make media accessible for our courses, we want to make sure that all of our students can interact and access it, and no exceptions. So sometimes that means, well, all the time, actually, it means we're going to add captions and transcripts. Videos and audio should have captions or transcripts so that students who are not using the audio, or maybe even just prefer to read it, have access to. And to be quite honest with you, I love transcripts because they're searchable. It gives me text. I can do Control F, and I can look back for key vocabulary that I really need to highlight. I know I'm kind of beating a dead horse with this, but using alt text and descriptions, all media, so static images and whatnot, we do want to make sure that we're having alt text. Claude.ai is still one of my favorite ones to get me that starting point, but it's still not perfect and I have to edit it. But even with the technical ones, something we demonstrated in a previous session was I gave it a parabola, a quadratic equation, a graph of one, and it even was able to tell me if it was opening up or opening down, where the vertex point was, the min, the max. It gave a lot of really useful information to give me some inspiration of where to get started. And we want to keep the design readable. Just talked about the color contrast, font size, everything like that. It makes a big difference for everyone. You saw what that yellow and white looked like. That was painful to look at and try to interpret. So use those checkers to kind of keep everything as readable as possible. And finally, check the keyboard and screen reader access. This is something I'm still learning myself. I actually have JAWS downloaded on my computer, which is an assistive technology. It is a screen reader, and it's really eye-opening to hear JAWS in action. So I highly encourage you, if you've never played around with those, to put yourself in someone else's shoes, or take a look at some of our previous sessions where we've demonstrated some of these items. It's eye-opening, and it really helps you understand how to best format your content so that it's readable and understandable to students, no matter if they're using an assistive device or not. So for creating accessible videos, provide alternate methods. There's kind of a workflow to ask yourself, the thought process for this. So the first question you ask yourself is, will we be using sound? I know there's a lot of videos out there that have no sound, and it's just a demonstration of something happening. That's not accessible. There's not going to be captions on that video because there's no sound. So if it's just a demonstration without audio, you do still need to provide a transcript of some sort to explain what is taking place in that video. Now, if you're using sound and video, that's synchronized media. That's what we're maybe really used to, like when I'm doing a screen recording myself or recording a lecture for my students. For that, you might even want to consider including captioning and transcripts. That way it gives students an option for how they want to interact with the materials. So when we think about that universal design for learning, we're not just talking about accessibility. We're talking about giving options to your learners for what works best for them. Having a transcript and captioning is not a bad thing. Captioning is a must, and we're going to talk about how to do that in just a moment. But this is a work in progress. We know that these things do take time, and we're hoping that faculty just starts to chip away a little bit at a time with us, and we're really going to make sure that all of our courses are accessible for our wide variety of students. So where can we start? We have given a lot of information over the past few months, and we always want to recommend that just pick one thing. Pick one thing of that Faculty 5 that you feel comfortable doing. Maybe your focus is on the alt text because you've already done the other things. Maybe your focus is on your documents because you have a lot of guided notes in your course, so you want to go back and make sure they're formatted accessibly. One of them is also making sure your videos have accurate closed captioning. So my screenshot showing right here shows an unedited caption for a video that I uploaded to YouTube. I know it's unedited for a couple reasons. For one, Lunch and Learn is not capitalized. We would call that a name here, so I would capitalize the L's in those. And also the acronym CCIT isn't capitalized either. I don't see any punctuation, so this tells me it's just the auto-generated transcripts from YouTube. So what I'm going to demonstrate for you now is how I, as an instructor, because I do have courses here as well, just like many of us, and I want to kind of show you how I would go about recording a video and editing the captions for my students. So I'm going to bounce over to Zoom. So what I did is I opened up Zoom in a meeting all by myself, and I recorded myself doing my short lesson. You'll see here it's 52 seconds. I'm going to work on this first one, 52 seconds. I chose to save it to the cloud so I could come to my Zoom account on the web, and I went to recordings and transcripts, and I was able to have it here. For the more option, I'm going to download the 2 files. Each file will be downloaded separately, which is perfect. The 2 files that it's downloading for me are the MP4, the video, and also the transcript. YouTube, and Laura, thank you so much for pointing this out. YouTube does do auto-generated transcripts, but they're not so great. Cleaning those up takes a lot of time. So the Zoom transcript still is going to need some cleaning up, but it's a much better starting point for you. So I'm going to pop over to my YouTube. I'm going to hit create and upload video. I made sure the video is pretty short because I know time is of the essence, and I'm going to drag my MP4 file, so my video file, over here. I'm going to give it a name real quick, Lunch and Learn Test. You do have to select if it's made for kids or not, and I'm going to hit next. Now, here's the fun part. There's an option that says add subtitles. I'm going to select add, And there's a few options. It gives me the option to upload a file. I'm going to upload it with timing because Zoom also provides the timing. And here's my transcript right here. You can see that it chunked my captions for me by time. There are a few things to edit, and we're not here to tell you that it's perfect right away. So you can see that it identified who was speaking each time. And I know, Christina, this was something that we had talked about too. So if you have a better workaround, please feel free to chime in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out my name because they don't need to know that in each of these boxes. And I'm also going to look for other things. So for example, good morning, everyone. That probably should be a comma because I was like, good morning, everyone. I wanted to record this short video to show our CCIT. It was close, so I'm going to say CCIT reference library and the digital accessibility guide that we'll speak about during our lunch and learn session. And I'm going to need to put a period because I'm ending a sentence. So it does need cleaning up. Some pro tips when you're recording is to try to carefully articulate. I'm a fast speaker. I know that. It's been the bane of my existence for a very long time. So intentionally slowing down and articulating these things is really important. I know that I often say lo siento, and Dr. Thompson called out how when she's editing the subtitles that it doesn't pick it up right. Or when we say WCAG, that WCAG, those standards, it doesn't pick it up correctly either. So we have great tools and technology for us, but we still need to use our expertise as the human intervention to make it as accessible as possible. So I'm not going to go through this whole thing right now, but once I'm done editing, I'm just going to hit done. I would go through, hit next, and I'm going to put it as unlisted. That means students can access it if I give them the link, but they can't search for it necessarily. All right, so I'm going to open up the video and it's buffering. There you go. And you can see that it has my comma, that it capitalized CCIT. And this is really hard to point out, so I want to do this really quick, is when I turn on the subtitles, the closed captioning, take a look at the top left corner. So when I say that, I want you to look, if you could, right over here. So let me demonstrate what I mean. So when I turn this on and off, do you see where it says English United States and then it disappeared? If it's not been edited, it will just say English auto-generated. That way you know that the video has not been reviewed for accuracy. Oh my gosh, Christina, thank you for sharing this pro tip. She said a way to remove it is to open the transcript in Word before you upload it and use the find and replace function. I'm actually going to demonstrate that if that's okay. What I'm doing is I went to my downloads and I'm opening the .vtt file. That's the transcript. And I'm going to open it in Word. This is the full transcript. You can see that it has the times. And so now I'm going to do find and replace. So there's a little find guy right here, and there's a find and replace right underneath of it. So what do I want to find? I want to find Jenna Cinnamon : and I want to replace it with, I'm just going to hit the space bar, and I'm going to hit replace all. There we go. And you can see that all the Jenna Cinnamons were taken out of here. So that is a great time saver. Christina, I'm glad you said that. And it might even help for you to edit it in Microsoft Word. That might be easier for some of you to kind of see it all at once as well. I'm going to go to subtitles, and I already have them in there. So I'm going to go to my details, subtitles, and let me clear them. We're going to try a new one. Done. Edit timings. Let's see. Can I upload a file? That's what I need to do. upload file. Let's try it with timing. And I just saved it as a test. So let's see. Oh, it still worked, but it didn't save my names. So let me see. Did
Was
I
the
save
extension
it?
on that one though, was that still the VTT or was that the one that you had created in Word?
Let me change my
Did you
screen
create it
share.
in Word or did you do it in Notepad?
I'm using Word. So this is the one that I took off the Jenna's file, save as, and let's try it edited in Word so I can find it easily. I'm just going to hit OK with this
Save it
pop-up.
as a plain text.
Yes, it's a plain text. You're absolutely right. I did use plain text. So let's try it again. I'm going to clear the subtitles. I'm going to upload with timing. There's my edited in Word, and it still did it. So as long as you save it in Word as plain text, it still worked. That's awesome.
Fabulous.
I still have my
Did you
timestamp.
make sure everyone saw how to save it in plain text, just in case they are unfamiliar with saving a document in a different format?
That is a great call. It actually defaulted that way to me, which was amazing. So I went to File, Save As, and it defaulted to plain text, which is a .txt file, which was awesome. So on both instances, it did that for me. So saving it as plain text allowed it to preserve those as well. So as our farewell, we do have our digital accessibility reference guide. This is an awesome resource. I will be honest with you. Sorry, I'm making my link descriptive. It is a great thing just to have bookmarked. I honestly keep the CCIT reference library bookmarked myself because I constantly pull from it. Even as I, use these things all the time, there's still great refreshers in there. So I actually want to show that too, in case you're not familiar with it. This is our CCIT website, ccit.dtcc.edu. And under faculty resources, there is Lunch and Learn. So you can find the recordings from this. And there's also the CCIT reference library. There are so many amazing resources on here. This is where you can find the digital accessibility reference guide. If you have questions about the templates with HTML, so I highly recommend bookmarking this page. There's a lot of great resources, and we're obviously here to help too. So I'm glad you pointed that out. Thank you, Laura. Our shameless plug at the end of every session is we do have a workshop survey we would love for you to complete. We really do read every single response. It is anonymous, but we would like to know how we can continue to better improve our PD. So if you have just a couple minutes to complete our survey, we would love that. And we'll hang around for a few more minutes if you have any questions, but thank you guys for joining us today.